One of the most common questions people ask when they learn about Norwegian culture is, why do Norwegians have two last names? This unique tradition has puzzled many, especially those unfamiliar with Scandinavian naming practices. It's not just about having an extra surname, there's a deep-rooted history and an evolving legal framework that shapes the way names are passed down in Norway. In this video, we'll dive into the origins of the double surname tradition, the law changes over the years, and how it all works in everyday life for Norwegians. Whether you're curious about how this custom started or wondering how it affects Norwegians today, you're in the right place to find out. The evolution of Norwegian names. A historical overview. Traditional Norwegian naming system. To understand why many Norwegians have two last names today, we first need to look back at the traditional Norwegian naming system. For centuries, Norwegians didn't have permanent family surnames like many countries do today. Instead, surnames were patronymic, meaning they were derived from the father's first name. This was common in Scandinavia, and it's an essential part of understanding Norwegian names. For example, if a father's name was Olav, his son would typically be given the surname Olavsson, which means son of Olav, and his daughter would have the surname Olavsdatter, meaning daughter of Olav. This system of patronymic surnames was widespread in rural Norway and helped identify people by their family lineage. But as society evolved, so did the practice of naming. Over time, surnames began to become more permanent. The use of a surname passed down through generations rather than being tied to the father's first name was gradually introduced, and this led to the modern surname system we see today. Despite this shift, traces of the old patronymic system remain in some Norwegian names. The shift to fixed family surnames. The turning point in Norway's naming system came in the late 1800s and early 1900s when the government passed laws making surnames permanent. Before these laws were introduced, it was common for people to change their surnames based on their father's name, which could vary from one generation to the next. The Norwegian Names Act of 1923 was a significant step in standardizing surnames. This law required all Norwegians to adopt one permanent family surname. This change was essential in creating a more standardized system for legal and civil records. It also helped to identify families and individuals more easily, particularly as Norway's population grew and society became more modernized. By the mid-1900s, the law was further refined to allow individuals to adopt their mother's surname as well as their father's surname. This was a major shift from the traditional male-dominated patronymic system. For example, if a mother had the last name Hansen and the father had the last name Olsen, their child could have either surname or both, hyphenated if the parents so desired. Double surnames and the legal framework. As more and more people chose to keep both their family names, the question of how to legally treat two surnames became a matter of legal clarification. In modern Norway, if a person decides to keep both family names, they must be connected by a hyphen to be considered as one surname legally. For instance, if a child's mother's last name is Larsen and their father's last name is Jensen, the child's official surname can be written as Larsen, Jensen. The hyphen ties the two names together, making both surnames legally recognized as a single family name. Without the hyphen, the first surname would be treated as a middle name, and only the second surname would be considered the official family surname. This rule is crucial because it explains why so many Norwegians appear to have two last names, even though it's not quite as simple as it looks at first glance. While the second surname is generally the one used in everyday life, the first surname is still legally part of the full name, and it carries important family history. Patronymics and farm names. The historical influence of Norwegian naming traditions. Now that we've covered how modern Norwegian naming laws work, it's important to understand how farm names, or gardnam, influence the practice of double surnames. The role of farm names. In the past, many Norwegian families took the name of the farm where they lived. This was especially common in rural areas, where families were closely tied to their land. A farm name was an easy way to identify a family by their place of residence. Farm names often ended in gard, meaning farm. So, If a family lived on a farm called Haugen, their surname would likely have been Haugengard, meaning they were from Haugen Farm. These names were important because they gave context to where the family lived and worked. Farm names were not just about land ownership, they also connected families to a particular region or community. In many ways, these farm names helped identify people in a time when family surnames were not yet standardized. Over time, these farm names evolved into more permanent surnames, which have been passed down through generations. Today, the use of farm names has become less common, but many modern Norwegian surnames still reflect their farm origins. For example, you may come across surnames like Lindberg, from Lind, meaning lime tree, and Berg, meaning hill, or Viken, from the Old Norse word for bay. These names are remnants of Norway's rural past and continue to be part of the national identity. The legacy of the patronymic system. Even with the legal changes introduced in the early 20th century, elements of the old patronymic system lingered. In fact, many people still carry what are effectively patronymic surnames, though now they are passed down in a more fixed manner. After the Norwegian Names Act of 1923, everyone had to adopt one permanent surname, but older traditions remained strong. In many cases, people would keep their farm name or patronymic as a second name or middle name. This is why you often see two family names in a person's full legal name. The practice of keeping multiple names, whether patronymic or farm-related, reflects the deep connection that Norwegians have with their history, their families, and their land. Even though the law requires a fixed surname, these traditions continue to influence how people are named today. Middle names versus last names in everyday life. While the legal and historical aspects of double surnames are important, it's also crucial to understand how these names function in everyday life for Norwegians. Despite having two last names, it's not always as complicated as it may seem. The role of middle names. In Norway, middle names are not as commonly used as they are in other cultures. If a person has a middle name, it's not typically used day to day, unless the person chooses to go by it. It's much more common for people to be recognized by their first and last names. When it comes to double surnames, the first surname is often treated as a middle name. This means that in most daily interactions, the second surname is the one people will recognize and use. If the surnames are hyphenated, both names are technically part of the official surname, but it's the second name that carries more weight socially. Official use of double surnames. On official documents, however, both surnames are important. Legal forms, passports, IDs, and other official records typically list the full name, including both last names. However, when people introduce themselves or when their name is used in conversation, it's the second surname that usually comes up. For example, if someone's name is Larsen, Jensen, they might introduce themselves as Jensen, even though Larsen is also part of their name. The use of both surnames reflects the parents' desire to share their family names with their children. It also represents the blending of family traditions, where both the mother's and father's surnames have equal importance, even if society typically recognizes only the second surname in day-to-day interactions. Conclusion. The legacy and meaning behind two last names. In conclusion, the reason why many Norwegians have two last names is a mix of cultural tradition and modern legal rules. The practice stems from the old patronymic and farm name systems, which were once used to identify people by their father's name and their family's land. Over time, Norway's naming laws evolved, leading to the current system where people can legally keep both their family names, as long as they are hyphenated. In everyday life, the second surname is the one that is most commonly used, but both names are legally recognized. This tradition shows how Norwegians maintain a strong connection to their family heritage while also adapting to modern naming practices. Whether it's for personal, historical, or cultural reasons, the practice of having two last names is a meaningful part of Norway's identity, one that continues to reflect both its past and present.